Welcome to Looking Backward, where we unveil the hidden journeys behind entrepreneurial success. Dive into the stories of resilience, failure, and serendipity to see how looking back can illuminate the path forward. I'm Chad, founder of Better Legal, which has grown to $2.5 million in annual revenue since inception in 2016. But I've been failing at startups since 2004, each misstep teaching me valuable lessons. Let's dive into the real stories that shape success. All right, this is another episode that is from the first cohort of 8 that is kind of a roll-up summary episode, if you will. And today we're going to talk about where people found their ideas for their startups, the 8 people that we discussed that you can look back at the previous episodes and try to look at patterns. And really, there are no patterns. I've got a custom GPT that I built in another video, kind of a hands-on video that isn't associated with the podcast, but is on my YouTube channel. I kind of walk through, or I'm going to start walking through. I've done one video. I'm going to keep doing more. And it's just Chad Sakonchik. You can Google YouTube Chad Sakonchik. And I'm basically talking about how I actually use kind of no code and AI together to do actual things. I talk about AI and no code a lot, and people have asked me specific questions about, well, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? So I started making videos, and those are actually the videos that perform the best, is just like literally how to do this. And so I'll continue doing that. Those will not be part of the Looking Backward podcast, but they will be on the YouTube channel. So where people found in the last 8 interviews, where they found their ideas. So I'm going to go kind of one by one on my custom GPT that I built. That is basically nothing more than every transcript from the video, from the interviews, put into one custom GPT on OpenAI ChatGPT. And I just basically ask it questions and say, find patterns between all the transcripts. And it kind of doesn't do a very good job. It does a terrible job, actually. And I think that's partly because it can't find patterns like there is. And I think that kind of means to me a little bit, or what it's starting to mean to me a little bit, is that there is no playbook for being a successful entrepreneur. There is no one way to do it. You can kind of fall into it in a myriad of ways. And so let's talk a little bit about how everybody did it, and let's just kind of maybe think about it. So we're going to start with Will Chang of Parting Pro, which was the funeral home SaaS. Basically, think of it as Shopify for a funeral home, digitizing funeral homes, which are previously a just very manual paper business that really is kind of a pain for people that have to deal with a loss and then immediately have to deal with these, generational old funeral homes that are the barriers to entry to, get someone buried or cremated or whatever. And they are preventing you from doing so because they're requiring like a paper hand signed PDF or, printed PDF that you hand sign, and then a check and all this other stuff. And they don't take credit cards. So his business is that. And, Will bumbled around a lot. He started kind of, and I think everybody did really. He started with corporate America, went to China and started doing startups in China, learned kind of how that worked and how it was different from the US, came back and was just like inhaling startups and living and breathing them night and day. And then one of his friends had a family member pass away, and they had to go through this, and they were just complaining about it. And that was the nugget that started the company. And so they just kind of did one thing after another. They scraped all the data of all the funeral homes in the US. They realized the funeral homes were kind of gatekeeping information. And so they just kind of did one thing after another. You can listen to the whole episode and learn more about how that went. But I think it's a really interesting story and a great way to kind of, jump into the deep end of a pool real fast and just acquire a ton of information just by, asking questions and calling people, cold calling. Jonathan Newer of Captain Experiences. He didn't have much entrepreneurial experience prior to this. He was more of a, didn't have a ton of jobs. that related to entrepreneurial was in kind of corporate America. And I think he just kind of decided he was going to do this and found the right investors and raised the money and started it. So that's another way to do it. Will Chernlin had just years and years and years of doing various things, but he was really fascinated with, he came from kind of middle America. And so he was fascinated with just widgets, like if you grew up in one of the hubs, major metropolitan hubs, like San Francisco, Austin, New York, you assume you make money in software. It's just kind of how it is. And growing up in, I think it was Michigan, somewhere in the Midwest, everybody there made money selling widgets. And so he kind of broke things down into what do these parts cost? How do I put them together? He was selling vapes for a while, but he was selling it through Amazon or eBay. And so he was exposed to the seller experience, and he was just kind of learning on the fly and learning as he went. And then all of the issues that he had, he just started a community, charged for the community, sold that, but then realized that that was where the money was. Just there were people that had these items that they needed to sell. They were selling them through catalogs or whatever. And instead of figuring it out themselves or hiring someone to come work for them in-house, they just pay him a retainer and he does that for them and does all the cleanup because he knows how to do it. It's almost like you can look at it as almost like a hosted service. If you're starting a website, you're not creating your own server. You're not putting it in a co-located facility and running DevOps on all that stuff. You're just going to Squarespace or Wix or Square or whoever one of the domain web hosts are. And that's kind of what he's doing, but for selling widgets through Amazon. And so he just kind of like was on that path and was just doing like, I would call little micro pivots. Paul Jackson of Animal House Fitness he was always building stuff. So he mentioned his entire family was just like cops. But his uncle was an engineer. And so his uncle kind of got him into fiddling with things. And then he was doing industrial design. He worked for Fisker, boosted boards. And so he just was familiar with like, there's this product that I think would be cool. And then he would just make it. And then that was it. And then he made it. And so that's how Animal House Fitness, it was just, you make, like with any business, you make 12 products, one product a month for 12 years, whether it's a piece of software or a physical item, tangible item. And then you just see what people want. You just keep making things and keep trying to sell them to people and see what people actually want. And then just, where you start seeing a little bit of smoke, you pour gasoline on and then you have a fire. That's the same thing how I did with Better Legal. I was doing all kinds of different startups and then just kind of fell into business formation. It was not on purpose. Didn't think it was going to be a lot of money. Just thought it was going to be a little side hustle doing a few LLCs a month for people. And then it just took off. Max Minsker of Bookmate. He is similar to kind of Quinn Rudolph, where he just was like, I'm going to start something. I'm going to do a startup. And he was just kind of Googling, what do people need? What kind of startup can I create? How do I do this? And so he was just doing people's bookkeeping because he found like that he could run ads on it and get people, get customers for cheap. And he was just doing it for no money. And then those people told him, hey, I don't want bookkeeping. This is actually a hassle. But I do need to do my taxes. I don't want to do bookkeeping. Bookkeeping sucks. But the federal government and the state governments force me to do taxes. And that is something I have to do. Again, same as Better Legal. It's something that people have to do. And so you kind of have a little bit of an edge there because they can't get out of it. They can't say, I don't want to buy your service. They can do it themselves, but it's just a hassle. So they pay a professional service, and we are cheaper than like us and Bookmate are cheaper than, your kind of Main Street accountant or attorney that's going to do the same thing. And his benefit was, as he said, he can specialize in specific, instead of, expecting your local CPA to understand all the different types of businesses that exist in a market. Max's business can specifically focus on SaaS companies or e-commerce companies. And so one CPA can focus on those types of companies, no matter where they are, whether in Texas, Wyoming, Nevada, California, or Kansas. Ellen Cassidy, she was another person that was just kind of bumbling through. She decided she was going to be an attorney. She was at a hot tub party, decided she was going to be an attorney, and then took the LSAT, decided she liked the LSAT more than the idea of being an attorney. So she started tutoring the LSAT, and then she wrote a book on how to crush the LSAT. And that book became a lead generator. It made its own money, but then it became a lead generator for her tutoring. And she has very, high dollar tutoring. And now she's trying to figure out how does she scale the tutoring. And that's what she's doing, her living flashcard. So it is just kind of a natural progression that she did one thing that was successful, but, limited upside. And so how can I make a little bit more money, a little bit more money, a little bit more money? Anisha Sanghavi, hers was kind of more natural, where she was just always customizing things similar to Paul Jackson, where she was kind of a serial customizer. She wanted something unique. She created hair clips on the playground and sold them, as a child. And then when she was going on cheerleading, events at West Virginia University, she didn't like the clothes that were kind of West Virginia logoed or designed. So she customized hers, made hers unique looking. And the girls were like, that looks great. Where do I get that? So she started selling these little customized items, and then said, okay, well, how do I make this at scale? And that's how she kind of fell into that. Hers was, it seems like it just was kind of like she started and it just took off, but she just kind of had a market, and she knew the market, and she didn't really have any competitors. And so that's why it seemed like it was easier, because she found a market that was desperately, people are not talking about it openly, but she found a market that was just desperately needing something. And so can you find a market where people aren't openly talking about, complaining about something, but there's this vacuum that exists and you just need to fill it, and you can just make something and it works, which takes me right into Quinn Rudolph, kind of sexy men's underwear. He knew his market. He did a ton of different things just to make any money to live, not to get rich, but to live. And so he then kind of folded that into basically saying, okay, well, I need to make money and I want to start my own business. And he literally Googled how to make money with no money. And he did kind of what a lot of people did, which was a drop shipping site. But because it was such a niche market that he knew so well, it crushed. After he crushed it in men's underwear, he then tried to replicate it in women's beauty and failed. And so he stuck with men's underwear, and then, went from Modern Undies to Awry Menswear, created his own label. And that's how that happened. So there is no one way to do it. But if you are just looking around and seeing where people are complaining, or seeing where people are like, I wish I had this, or I wish I had that, those people are doing that all the time, all over the place. And if you just start asking questions and say, well, what if you had this? What if you had this? You start calling around, seeing who the competitors are. And then just create something and just do it rapidly until you actually find something where people are willing to make money. And my philosophy is always, if you can sell it to one person, you can sell it to 10. If you can sell it to 10, you can sell it to 100. If you can sell it to 100, you can sell it to 1,000. If you have 1,000 customers, you should be able to make a living, in my opinion. Now, there is that kind of early, if you can get one customer, you can get 10. That's the key. I think if you get one customer, you have to figure out what you do. Maybe you have to change your product or service a little bit. Maybe you have to tweak it to get those 10. Maybe you have to do something a little unique for each person to get those 10. But what is the common thread between all of those unique individual sales that can be one thing? So you might have to kind of twist around a little bit and not say like, this is what I'm selling and I will not change it for you and not offer any alterations. You have to buy this thing. That's like selling a hamburger without the options of cheese or ketchup or pickles or onions. You can't be so hard on that, not being willing to adapt a little bit, because that's how you discover what people actually want, is asking people, this is what I have. Do you want it? I do, but only if it's a little bit like this. If it's within reason, do it, and then try to do it again and again and again and again. Once you get to 10 sales, you should kind of understand what the customer actually wants, create that thing, and then sell it to the next 10, the next 10. You might have to keep making little tweaks, but the tweaks should be a little less, a little less, a little less until you finally find that thing, or you just have different variations of something. Maybe you have a red one and a blue one and a green one. So anyway, we'll stop there. Let's see, what did the famous one? My GPT always comes up with a famous story that relates. This aligns with the story of Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, who was inspired to transform Starbucks from a coffee bean store into a coffee shop after his trip to Italy, fascinated by the Italian coffee culture. This demonstrates how personal experiences and exposure to different cultures or business models can lead to transformative business ideas. So basically what I'm reading here is that Starbucks was a bean roaster and sold the beans, but did not actually sell the coffee. And so they based on his trip and the experience that was provided, I wouldn't say that Starbucks is providing the same experience as an Italian coffee shop, but it seems to work for them. So I will stop there, and I will see you next week for another one of these private you and me episodes.